The scream pierced through the quiet morning air of the parking lot, startling a flock of birds from the nearby oak tree. Rowan Drake walked into Harbor Light Café on December 20th, thinking he was meeting someone about his late wife's memorial scholarship fund. His dark brown skin was weathered from years of outdoor construction work, and his close-cropped hair was starting to show hints of gray at the temples. But the second he saw the woman in scrubs sitting in the corner booth, the second she looked up and said 5 words that stopped his heart, everything changed. "Lila wanted me to find you." He realized he had been completely set up, and what she told him next would leave him crying in front of a room full of strangers on a Friday night 3 days before Christmas. To understand why those words hit him like a freight train, you need to know what his morning looked like. And honestly, it looked like every morning for the past 2 years. Wake up at 5:30, get his daughter Emery ready for school while she barely said 3 words, then drive to whatever job site Drake and Sons Construction was working that week. This particular Friday, he was at a residential renovation in the Chicago suburbs, tearing out a kitchen that had not been updated since 1985. His crew was already there when he pulled up in his truck at 6:45. "Morning, boss," his lead guy Milo called out. Milo was a tall, broad-shouldered black man with locks pulled back in a leather tie and hands that could operate heavy machinery with surprising delicacy. Rowan nodded and grabbed his tool belt and got to work, because working meant not thinking and not thinking meant not feeling. That was how he had survived for 730 days since Lila passed. His phone rang around noon while he was sitting in his truck eating a sandwich that tasted like cardboard. His best friend Tori's name popped up on the screen. He almost did not answer because Tori had been on him for months about getting back out there, and he was not interested. Tori was one of those people who believed firmly that everyone deserved love and happiness, and she had made it her personal mission to pull Rowan out of his grief. "Hey T, what's up?" Rowan said, with his mouth half full. Tori's voice came through way too cheerful for a Friday afternoon. "Remember how Lila always talked about starting that scholarship fund for underprivileged kids who wanted to go to college?" Rowan felt his chest get tight because, yeah, he remembered. They had talked about it in the hospice bed 2 weeks before she passed, her hand in his, her beautiful dark skin ashen but her eyes still bright, while she made him promise he would do something good with her memory. "Of course I remember," Rowan said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. Tori kept going like she had this all planned out. "Well, I found someone who wants to help make it happen. Big donor, but she wants to meet you first, get a feel for."
Had left as soldiers marching to war. They were returning as men who had done their duty and earned their rest. The march through the north was a progression of homecomings. Each lord, upon reaching his own lands, would take his leave with his men and head to his own castle. Lord Umber departed at Last Hearth, Lord Carstark at Carhold, the Glovers to Deepwood Motte. Each departure reduced the size of the host, but each was also a celebration. Men reuniting with families they hadn't seen in months, bringing news of survival and victory. Cregan watched them go with mixed feelings. These men had followed him south, had obeyed his commands, had maintained discipline even when it would have been easier to descend into the same barbarism that plagued the southern armies. They had been everything he could have asked for, and now they were going home to rebuild their own lives, to try to forget what they had seen and done. He wondered how many would succeed. War changed men. Even a relatively short, relatively clean war like this one left marks. He had seen it in his soldiers' eyes, the ones who had witnessed the devastation in the Riverlands, who had stood guard during the executions in King's Landing, who had learned that the realm they thought they knew was far darker and crueler than the songs suggested. They would carry those marks home with them, and the North would have to help them bear that weight. Finally, after weeks of travel, Winterfell appeared on the horizon. The castle looked exactly as Cregan had left it. Ancient grey walls, the smoking hot springs, the godswood with its heart tree. But somehow it seemed different. Or, perhaps, he was different. He had left as a lord, marching to war. He was returning as something else, someone who had held the power of life and death over the entire realm and then voluntarily given it up. The people of Winterfell turned out to greet him. Servants, guards, the remaining men-at-arms who had stayed to defend the castle, and small folk from Winter Town. They cheered as he rode through the gates, and Cregan allowed himself a small smile. It was good to be home. That night he held a feast in the great hall. Nothing elaborate. The North didn't believe in Southern-style excess, but enough to celebrate the return of their men and the successful completion of their mission. Lords and soldiers ate together, sharing trenches and passing ale, telling stories of what they had seen. Some stories were funny, others were grim. All of them were true, or as true as war stories ever were. Cregan listened to them all, occasionally adding a detail or correcting an exaggeration, but mostly just letting his men talk. They needed to process what they had experienced. Talking was part of that process. Late in the evening, after most of the men had either gone to their beds or were too drunk to make sense, Lord Manderley approached Cregan at the high table. "A word, my lord?" Manderley asked. They stepped out into the
Café first at 6:55, because being early was built into his DNA from years of running construction jobs. The café was cozy, all exposed brick and warm lighting, with the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. He scanned the room, looking for someone who seemed like a big donor type. He spotted a woman in the corner booth wearing hospital scrubs and figured maybe she was a doctor with money. She was beautiful, he noticed, despite himself. Rich brown skin, those gorgeous locks, and an air of competence that reminded him somehow of Lila. He walked over and stuck out his hand. "Ava, I am Rowan Drake." The woman looked up and her face did this thing where recognition hit her like a slap. Rowan did not recognize her at all because 2 years ago when she had been in his house taking care of Lila, he had barely been functional enough to remember his own name. "Rowan? Yes. Hi. Please sit down." Her voice was shaking just slightly, and Rowan slid into the booth across from her, thinking she seemed nervous for a donor meeting. They did the awkward small talk thing for about 30 seconds before Rowan said, "So, Tori mentioned you are interested in Lila's scholarship fund." Ava's face shifted to confusion. "Scholarship fund? She told me you had questions about Lila's final days, that you needed to talk to someone who was there." Rowan felt his stomach drop straight through the floor. "Wait, what? You knew Lila?" Ava nodded slowly. "I was her hospice nurse. I was with her for the last 6 weeks." Rowan stood up so fast his chair scraped loud against the tile floor. Every head in the cafe turned to look at them. Tori set this up. His voice came out way too loud and he did not care. "This is not about a donation. This is what? A blind date disguised as a business meeting?" He was grabbing his jacket off the back of the chair, feeling betrayed and furious, and like the walls were closing in. Ava stood too. "I am so sorry. I did not know. If I had known, I never would have agreed to this." She looked genuinely upset, which made Rowan feel slightly less angry, but still desperate to get out of there. "It is not your fault. Tori had no right. I am sorry you got pulled into whatever this is." He was heading for the door, weaving between tables, just needing air and space and to be literally anywhere else. "Rowan, wait." Ava's voice cut through the ambient noise of the cafe. "Lila wanted me to find you." Rowan stopped dead with his hand on the door handle, his back still turned because if he looked at her, he might actually break down right there. "What are you talking about?" he said without turning around. Ava's voice was shaking but determined. Before she passed, she made me promise something. She said 2 years from now, Christmas week, find Rowan and tell him something for me. She knew you would shut down. She knew you would stop living, and she wanted me to deliver a message. Rowan turned around slowly, and the entire cafe had gone. Quiet. Everyone watching this scene unfold like it was dinner theater. His dark eyes were already burning with tears he refused to let fall. She planned this 2 years ago? Ava nodded, her own eyes wet. She loved you so much, Rowan. She wanted to make sure you would be okay. Please sit back down and let me tell you what she said. I have been carrying her words for 2 years. Rowan walked back to that corner booth on legs that did not feel entirely solid. The whole cafe was still watching them like this was the most interesting thing that had happened all week. He slid into the seat across from Ava without saying a word because his throat was too tight to form sentences. Ava reached into her purse with hands that were shaking and pulled out a sealed envelope that looked worn from being carried around for way too long. Rowan saw his name written in Lila's handwriting across the front and felt like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. She gave me this the night before she passed, Ava said quietly. Made me promise not to open it, just to give it to you exactly 2 years later during Christmas week. I have been carrying it in my bag every single day, waiting for the right moment. Rowan stared at that envelope like it might explode if he touched it. I do not know if I can read this here. Not in front of all these people. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Ava nodded, understanding completely. You do not have to read it now. But I also need to tell you what she said out loud. What she made me memorize so I could say it to your face when I found you. Rowan looked up at her. This stranger who had cared for his wife in her final weeks. This woman who had been carrying a message like some kind of emotional time capsule. She made you memorize something? Ava's eyes were already wet. She said the letter was for later when you were alone, but the words were for the exact moment I tracked you down. Rowan braced himself, hands flat on the table like he was trying to keep the world from tilting sideways. Okay. Tell me. Tell me what she said. Ava took a shaky breath and her voice came out steady despite the tears starting to fall. She said, Tell Rowan that I am not gone. I am in every sunrise he shows Emery. Every house he builds with those strong hands. Every moment he chooses joy over grief. Tell him that loving me does not mean stopping his life. It means living it fully because I cannot anymore. Tell him 2 years is long enough to mourn. It is time to let someone new make him smile. Rowan put his head in his hands right there at the table and his shoulders started shaking. He was crying in front of a cafe full of strangers, but he could not have stopped if his life depended on it. Ava reached across the table and took his hand without thinking. Pure nurse instinct kicking in. She also said, Tell him Emery needs to see him happy, not just surviving. That little girl is watching everything and learning that grief is forever. And Lila did not want that. Rowan looked up with tears streaming down his dark cheeks. How did she know? How did she know I would still be stuck 2 years later? How did she know I would be going through the motions like some kind of robot? Ava's thumb rubbed circles on the back of his hand. Because she knew you, Rowan. She said you would bury yourself in work. You would build beautiful homes for other families while your own house stayed frozen in time. You would put Emery first, and yourself never. And she wanted you to know that is not what she wanted for you. The waitress appeared with a whole box of tissues and 2 glasses of water without saying a word. Just set them down and walked away. Rowan grabbed a handful of tissues and tried to pull himself together. I have not decorated for Christmas in 2 years. The confession came out like he was admitting to a crime. Emery asks every year, and I make excuses. Say we are too busy. Say maybe next year. And she stopped asking because she knows the answer. Ava squeezed his hand. Lila knew that too. That is why she picked Christmas week for me to find you. She said it was your favorite time of year before she got sick, and she wanted you to love it again. Rowan let out this broken laugh. She thought of everything, did she not? Planned this whole thing from a hospice bed. She loved you so much, Ava said, and her voice cracked. Those last 6 weeks, all she talked about was you and Emery, how you met in college at some terrible party, how you proposed while you were both covered in paint from renovating your first apartment, how you cried harder than she did when Emery was born. Rowan felt more tears coming. I cannot believe you remember all that. Ava smiled through her own tears. It is hard to forget. She made me promise I would wait exactly 2 years because she said that is how long you would need to grieve properly before you would be ready to hear any of this. And she was very specific about Christmas week because she wanted you to have joy again during the holidays. Rowan's voice came out wrecked. I do not know if I can do this. She is asking me to move on, and I do not know how. Ava pulled out her phone. She knew you would say that. She made me take a video. Do you want to see it? Or is this already too much? Rowan felt his heart pounding so hard it hurt. There is a video? Ava nodded. Filmed it 3 days before she passed. Made me swear I would not show you until I delivered the message first. Rowan wiped his face. Okay. Yeah. Show me. I need to see her. Ava pulled up the video on her phone and turned it so they could both see the screen. And there was Lila in the hospice bed, looking thin but smiling, that smile Rowan used to wake up to every morning. Her beautiful dark skin was pale, but her eyes held that same light that had captivated him since the day they met. Hi, baby. Lila's voice came through the tiny speaker. If you are watching this, it means Ava found you, and it has been 2 years, and I am hoping you are doing okay. Rowan made this sound like all the air had been punched out of his lungs. Lila kept talking. I know you, Rowan Drake. I know you are probably still wearing that ratty Howard sweatshirt I tried to throw away like 6 times, still eating cereal for dinner, still working yourself to death on job sites because it is easier than dealing with feelings. Rowan was crying so hard he could barely see the screen. Lila's voice got softer. But here is the thing, my love. I did not marry you so you could stop living when I did. I married you because you built me a life I loved, literally and metaphorically. You built our home with your own hands and filled it with laughter. And Emery deserves to see that version of you, the one who smiles and jokes and makes terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings. Lila's eyes were wet now too in the video. So I am asking you, 2 years later, to try. Go on a date. Decorate for Christmas. Let yourself be happy without feeling guilty. And if Ava is watching this with you, be nice to her. She has carried this message for 2 years because I asked her to. And she is pretty incredible. Lila blew a kiss at the camera. I love you forever, Rowan. Now go live for both of us. The video ended. Rowan and Ava were both sobbing at the table. Half the cafe was crying too. Some woman 3 tables over was openly weeping into her pasta. The waitress brought over more tissues without being asked. They sat in silence for a few minutes, just trying to breathe. Finally, Rowan said, I am sorry Tori tricked you into this. This is not fair to you. You are just trying to keep a promise, and I am falling apart. Ava shook her head. Actually, I am glad she tricked me. I have been trying to figure out how to reach you for months. I did not know how to just show up at your door and say, hey, your wife who passed 2 years ago left you a message. They talked for another hour about Lila's final days. Rowan asked questions he had been too scared to ask anyone else. Was she in pain? Was she scared? Did she know how much he loved her? Ava answered everything with the honesty of someone who had been there. She told him about her own story, too, how she had lost her mom to the same illness 5 years ago, how she became a hospice nurse to help families the way she wished someone had helped hers, how Lila had reminded her that caregivers are people, too, who need to take care of themselves. Around 9 o'clock, Rowan looked at his phone and realized he had been there for 2 hours. I should go. Emery is with my brother, but I need to get home. They both stood up awkwardly. In the parking lot, Rowan said, "Thank you for keeping your promise to her, for finding me, for all of this." Ava said, "Of course." There was this moment where neither of them knew what to do next. "Tori probably thought this would turn into something," Rowan said, and his voice was tight, like romantic or whatever. "But I am not ready for that. I am sorry." Ava looked relieved. "I am not either, 100%. I was not looking for a date. I just wanted to deliver the message." Rowan felt like he could breathe again. "Okay, good. So, we are on the same page." They said awkward goodbyes and drove away in opposite directions. Rowan sat in his truck in his own driveway for 20 minutes, just staring at that sealed letter before finally going inside. 3 days later, on December 23rd, Rowan still had not opened the letter. It was sitting on his nightstand, taunting him. Emery came into his room that morning before school. "Daddy, what is that?" she asked, pointing at the envelope. Emery was 7 years old with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Her natural hair was styled in 2 puffs that Rowan had learned to do himself, watching YouTube tutorials at midnight. "Just a letter from Mommy. She wrote it a long time ago." His voice came out thick. Emery climbed onto his bed. "Are you going to read it?" "When I am ready, baby." Emery went quiet for a minute, then said in this small voice, "I miss her, but I also miss you. You are here, but you are not really here." Rowan felt like she had just driven a nail straight through his heart. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Emery looked at him with eyes way too old for 7 years. "You do not smile anymore, Daddy. You do not do Christmas stuff. Mommy loved Christmas, and now we do not even have a tree." Rowan pulled his daughter into a hug and realized she was right. He had been so focused on just surviving, he had forgotten his kid was watching and learning that this is what life looks like after loss. He made a decision that was probably crazy, pulled out his phone and called Ava. When she answered, sounding surprised, he just started talking. "I need help. I know this is weird, but I need to decorate for Christmas for Emery, and I cannot do it alone. All Lila's decorations are in storage, and I cannot face them by myself, and I do not know why I am calling you, but—" Ava cut him off. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Text me your address." Ava showed up at Rowan's house 20 minutes later in jeans and a sweatshirt, looking nothing like the composed nurse from the café. Emery opened the door with eyes that went wide when she saw a stranger standing there. "Who are you?" Emery asked with all the suspicion a 7-year-old could muster. Ava knelt down to her level. "I am Ava. I am a friend of your dad's. I am here to help with Christmas decorations, if that is okay with you." Emery's entire face transformed like someone had flipped a light switch. "We are decorating? Really? Daddy said we could." Rowan appeared behind her, looking grateful and terrified in equal measure. "Yeah, baby. We are decorating. Ava is going to help us because I cannot do it alone." They drove to the storage unit in Rowan's truck, with Emery chattering non-stop in the back seat about ornaments she remembered from when she was little. When Rowan I unlocked the unit and saw all those boxes labeled in Lila's handwriting, his hands started shaking. "Christmas decorations handle with joy," one box said. Rowan just stood there staring at it until Ava touched his arm gently. "We can do this one box at a time, and if it gets too hard, we stop. Okay?" Rowan nodded and grabbed the first box. They loaded up the truck bed with what felt like his entire past, packed in cardboard. Back at the house, they spent the next 3 hours transforming the place. Ava strung lights along the porch railing while Rowan held the ladder steady. Emery directed the whole operation like a tiny general. "That wreath goes on the door. The snowman goes in the front yard. Mommy always put the star on top last." Her voice was so full of excitement that Rowan felt his chest get tight watching her. They found Lila's old Christmas playlist on a dusty iPod and played it through the speakers. For the first time in 2 years, Rowan's house felt alive instead of like a museum dedicated to grief. Emery fell asleep on the couch around 9 p.m., surrounded by empty boxes and tissue paper. Rowan covered her with a blanket while Ava made them both coffee in the kitchen. They sat on the floor by the Christmas tree they had just decorated, exhausted, but something close to content. "Thank you for coming," Rowan said quietly. "I could not have done this without you." Ava leaned her head back against the couch. "You could have. You just needed someone to take the first step with you. And honestly, it helped me too. I have not decorated for Christmas in 3 years, since my mom passed." Rowan looked at her, really looked, and saw the same exhaustion and grief he carried every day. "Tori did not just trick me, did she? She tricked you too, into dealing with your own stuff." Ava laughed softly. "She is smarter than both of us combined. Apparently, I have been so busy taking care of everyone else, I forgot I am allowed to have a life too." They sat in comfortable silence watching the tree lights blink. Then Rowan pulled the letter out of his pocket. "I have been carrying this around since you gave it to me. I keep almost reading it then, losing my nerve. But I think I need to do it now, and I think I need you here when I do." Ava sat up straighter. "Are you sure? This is really personal, Rowan." But he was already opening the envelope with hands that would not stop shaking. He read silently at first. Ava watched his face go through about 17 emotions in 30 seconds. Then he started reading out loud in a voice that kept breaking. "My dearest Rowan, if you are reading this, it has been 2 years, and I am hoping you have started to heal. I am hoping Emery has your smile and your terrible sense of humor. I am hoping you are still building beautiful homes with those strong hands that I love so much." Rowan had to stop and wipe his eyes before he could keep going. "But I am also guessing you are still scared. Scared to move on. Scared that loving someone new means forgetting me. So let me be crystal clear. It does not. I want you to fall in love again. I want Emery to see you happy with someone who makes you laugh. I want you to have more love in your life, not less." Ava was crying now too. Rowan kept reading. "You once told me that love is not finite. That loving me did not mean you loved your family less. It meant your heart grew. Remember that. Your heart can grow again. I handpicked Ava for this because in those final weeks I saw her heart. She has been hurt too. She gives everything to everyone else. She needs someone to see her for once." Rowan looked up at Ava, who had her hand over her mouth. "She was talking about you. She wanted us to meet. She planned this 2 years ago." Ava was full on sobbing. She was pretty incredible. Rowan nodded. She really was, and she was also apparently a matchmaker from beyond the grave. They both laughed through their tears. Rowan finished reading the letter out loud. "All I ask is this. Do not waste the life you have left honoring the life we shared. Live, Rowan. Decorate for Christmas. Go on dates. Marry again if you find the right person. Give Emery a full life, not a memorial. I love you forever. But you have to let me go enough to let someone else in." They sat there on the floor for a long time, just breathing. Finally, Rowan said, "I am terrified of this, of feeling something for someone who is not her." Ava said, "Me too. I have built my whole life around not needing anyone, around being the helper, never the one who needs help." Rowan turned to face her. "What if we just try? Like friends first, no pressure, no expectations, just 2 people who understand grief trying to figure out how to be happy again." Ava smiled through her tears. "I would really like that." 6 months later, Rowan was finishing up a kitchen renovation when his phone rang. It was Ava asking if he wanted to grab lunch. His crew noticed how his whole face changed when he answered. "You got it bad, boss," Milo said with a grin. Rowan did not even deny it, because yeah, he did. He had spent the last 6 months slowly, carefully falling in love with someone who understood his past and did not need him to be over it. They had been taking it slow, coffee dates and walks and family dinners with Emery, who adored Ava. Somewhere between February and June, Rowan had realized he was actually happy for the first time in years. At lunch, Ava reached across the table and took his hand. "I need to tell you something, and I am nervous about it." Rowan's heart started pounding. "Okay, what is wrong?" Ava shook her head. "Nothing is wrong. It is just, I think I am falling in love with you, and I needed to say it out loud before I lost my nerve." Rowan felt his eyes get wet. "I think I have been in love with you since you showed up at my house to help me decorate. I was just too scared to say it. But Ava, I love you. And it does not feel like betraying Lila. It feels like honoring her, because she wanted this." 1 year after that first cafe meeting, Rowan asked Ava to meet him at Harbor Light Cafe. She showed up confused because they did not usually go there. "Why here?" she asked as they walked to the same corner booth where everything started. Rowan slid into the seat across from her just like that first night. "Because this is where you delivered Lila's message, where you cracked me open and reminded me how to live, and I need to ask you something here." Where it all began. He got down on one knee right there in the booth. "Ava Lynn, you saw me at my absolute lowest and did not run. You helped me rebuild my life brick by brick. You love my daughter like she is your own. Will you marry me?" Ava was crying before he even finished. "Yes, absolutely yes. I cannot imagine my life without you two in it." The whole cafe erupted in applause. The same waitress from a year ago came running over. "I was here that night you both cried. I knew you would end up together." They got married in the spring at a small outdoor ceremony with just family and close friends. Emery took her job as flower girl so seriously she had a checklist. Rowan's vows were, "Lila taught me that love multiplies. It does not divide. Loving you does not mean I loved her less. It means my heart grew, just like she said it would. Thank you for being patient while I figured that out." Ava's vows were, "You taught me that caregivers need care too, that it is okay to let someone see my heart." Lila left me a gift when she asked me to find you. She gave me a family I did not know I needed. During the reception, Emery pulled Ava aside with her serious face on. "Are you my mom now?" Ava knelt down carefully. "I am your Ava. Your Lila will always be your mom, and I would never try to replace her. But I will always be here too. Is that okay with you?" Emery thought about it for exactly 3 seconds, then threw her arms around Ava's neck. "That is perfect. Mommy would really like you." The next Christmas, they were all in Rowan and Ava's house decorating together. There were photos of Lila on the mantle right next to their wedding pictures. Because you do not erase the past, you honor it while building the future. Emery was teaching Ava her mom's hot chocolate recipe, and Rowan was attempting to hang lights without Ava's help and failing spectacularly. When Ava walked over to steady the ladder, he looked down at her. "Thank you for carrying that message, for seeing me when I was invisible." She squeezed his ankle. "Thank you for letting me in, for teaching me that my heart could grow too. Sometimes being tricked is the best thing that ever happens to you." Rowan thought he was meeting a donor and walked into a setup that would save his life. Ava carried a message for 2 years from a dying woman and delivered it to a broken man, and ended up healing her own heart in the process. This story is for everyone stuck in grief thinking they do not deserve happiness. For everyone who needs permission to move forward. For everyone learning that loving again does not erase who you lost. It honors them by choosing to keep living. Lila gave Rowan that permission from a hospice bed, and he took it, and his life grew because of it. The people we lose want us to live fully, not just survive.